Blessed ones, it's time for all of you to begin to think as does your mighty I Am presence, to know in the fashion in which your presence knows, to awaken to those bedrock eternal realities that are the native realm, home to the untrammeled spirit of your own mighty God presence. You are in the process of reacquainting yourself with this complete sphere of identity that is the truth of who you are. As a portion of that reacquaintance, throughout this fortnight, you shall be retracing and retracing and retracing until you have really and truly mastered and committed to memory the lines of the eternal passage of your mighty presence, the patterns which it has decreed for itself, the patterns which it knows for itself, which it is resolved to produce through the projection of itself into this world of form which you yourself are. Chief amongst these, you shall gain a greater appreciation for the nature of the threefold flame of your mighty presence, that heart of your presence here in this world, ensouling your four lower bodies. Likewise, you shall expand and expand and expand still more your awareness of the nature of your own beloved individualized I Am presence, so that coming into that awareness, you will be able to actually cooperate with the powers of that presence that have been banked unto the present moment, awaiting that light of awakening to dawn within your conscious awareness, so that you could, through the upraised connection which you establish with your heart's devotion and your heart's call, liberate that infinite power of your presence to produce in you the miracle of change in this world and to restore you to the fullness of your divine inheritance. In the course of this, of course, you are also going to have more and more one of the greatest gifts that you could ever possess. And that is the gift of divine memory, which includes, mind you, not only the ability to recollect or recollect or remember those memories of things presumably that have happened in the stream of time of the past, but also recollect, as Merlin is renowned to have done, to have remembered the future backwards in the present tense, drawing to himself those conscious, vivified life records of the future, which are also part of your blessed destiny. As a part of this process, before we delve too deeply into those elements, we are going to set a few axioms in place. In this case, as in the case of mathematics or physics, the concept of an axiom is that it is a principle which is in its very nature so fundamental as to be incapable of being subdivided any further. It has to be accepted by its very definition and acted upon with the faith that it is, in fact, a correct definition. These axioms, as they are built on, one after another, do help to provide a framework that is a ladder, likened unto Jacob's ladder, that you can climb one rung at a time, ascending along the reasoned intuition of those axioms until you find yourself ensconced in the heart of your own mighty presence. So we are going to now, for just a few moments, speak of a few of those axioms. The first of them, and mind you, as is true of something that is so simple and fundamental, it might at first glance be dismissed by you as being self-evident and passed over for something more sophisticated. There is a ray of truth in in these axioms that has to be resonated and reckoned with. And only then can those principles be built upon. So here is one of those. In reality, no thing or no one can ever actually become something which it is not already. At least is not already in eternity. No thing and no one can ever actually become something that they are not actually already. This might seem to be self-evident, but it is it has very important implications when it comes to the nature of your own mighty I Am presence, your relationship to that presence, and the destiny that envelops you and your presence. Another one of these axioms is that nothing and no one ever ceases to be that which they are or it is at each of the levels of God reality. This one is a little bit harder to understand unless you already have the understanding of the many realms of the emanations of life. Those have been taught at Acropolis Sophia now for many years. They're typically referred to as the 7 planes, beginning with the innermost of the one, coming down until you encounter the worlds of mind and feeling and the outer physical world. Each of these worlds has its own set of sensory impulses, and your consciousness in each of those realms will have its own set of sense perception, such as the 5 physical senses in the physical world. When it comes to the ray of your selfhood, of your individuality, as it comes forth out of the presence as it descends. It never ceases to be that which it is in each of those realms as it comes from the innermost realm of the absolute oneness of the allness of the Godhead to the outermost. It stays in its station, and it stays there, and this is part of the importance of it. It stays there in the way of being, the mode of expression that is consistent with that realm. It never really changes into something other than that which it is at that level. For example, this will work in our case. You are very familiar with the concept of your beloved mighty I Am presence in the electronic body. And when that presence wishes to operate in the realm that is known as the Buddhic world, your presence expands and extends its heart and its life down and into that Buddhic realm. But if you were to be an outside observer to the process, you would never, in all eternity, ever observe a case of where the electronic body, the mighty I Am presence, vanished from that ascended master realm and then only reappeared in the realm of the Christ, the Buddhic realm. That is absolutely impossible and never happens. So it is as well with the process of incarnation, that when the life stream goes forth into incarnation and the heart flame is lowered into the mental and the emotional and the physical worlds, the Christ presence does not bid sayonara to the Buddhic realm, vanish from that Buddhic realm, and reappear down here in this outer world. If you could trace the progression, you would see that there is this permanent ray of consciousness and of individuality that is eternally seated in each of those eternal realms and descends one realm at a time, building up vehicles in each of those in turn. A good example of how this was misconstrued in the past had to do with the stage of individuality when first that individualization from the one steps forth out of the great central sun and expresses as the totality of individuality known as the great God flame. In times past, prior to the Temple of the Presence as an ascended master activity, there was the erroneous idea that what made two people twin flames was the fact that at one time they had been a solitary God flame. Like the symbol of the Tao, this God flame had separated into two mighty I Am presences, each of which was one half of the former God flame. Then you had merely that history that they had shared once upon a time in the God flame. That led to the mistaken idea that once this expression of twin flames had come forth, that the God flame at its higher plane of reality had ceased to exist, and that all that remained were the two twin flames, each, in a sense, feeling as if they were, in some sense, at least in the case of an unascended light stream, only one half of a former whole. Now, that is absolutely impossible and does not occur. Rather, it is the case that forever the great God flame remains at its station as this whole sense of being, truly individualized, yes, and continues to radiate forth the glorious mighty I am presence in the electronic body, the glorious causal body of the electronic body, the glorious Buddhic world of the Christ presence, and then, as has been the case for countless incarnations, this same presence has sent forth itself, projecting its blessed heart into the mental world, where again, that memory body was a permanent way station for the heart flame of the presence, and continued an uninterrupted life in that memory, so that regardless of how many separate comings and goings into incarnation there may have been, all of that remains one unbroken state of consciousness in the memory body. Only then, when you have the successive lowering of that heart flame into thought, feeling, and the physical world, and the relinquishing of the heart flame upon the substance of each of those worlds in turn, does that occur. That there is an interruption in the unbroken stream of consciousness into separate incarnations. But you will notice in all cases that as the incarnation begins, the mind, emotions, and etheric double are first created before the physical. And when the bodies are divested, they are divested in the reverse order. First, the physical is relinquished, then the etheric double, then the emotional, then begins the long devachanic life in the mental body that lasts the whole span between incarnations unless there's an ascension. And only at the end of that is that mental body relinquished, and the life in the memory body continues on. So if you see, here is that principle, that at each level, the individualization of the presence stays what it is and expands out from itself other expressions of itself. The reverse, which we see in incarnation, by the way, can and does occur. That after the resurrection takes place, the vehicles are drawn up successively with the crystal cord and with the threefold flame, so that rather than abandoning those bodies, they are drawn up into higher and higher vehicles until, unless it suits the purpose of the mighty I Am presence, that presence will be utilizing primarily the electronic body in the ascended state. And what had been earth and water and air and fire are now all raised into the electronic level of substance. And they remain there except when that ascended master, for purposes best known to him or her, decides to come forth into incarnation. All of this pertains directly, this preparatory definition of these axioms, to the concept of moments in eternity, to the concept of the consciousness as it is at the level of your beloved mighty I Am presence. Because there are a number of attributes that are part of the nature of your own presence, that if you were to evaluate those attributes from the human standpoint, you would be frustrated as to the purposes of life. You would think that life was a vanity, that it was an absurdity, that did not have a worthy purpose. However, when those same things are experienced as they are known and experienced by your beloved mighty I Am presence, they make perfect logical sense, and they ring with a ring of truth and authenticity that cannot be denied. One of those attributes of your mighty presence is a mystery that beloved Saint Germain has explained over and over again, that as you begin to understand it and have the insight into it, you will appreciate and you will understand how the mighty I Am presence does in fact create, and how it brings forth what appears to you to be something brand new and different, but that which is not truly different. This attribute, one of them, is the concept of the changeless nature of your own God presence, and the changeless nature of the great I Am, that I Am. Also, the attribute that in its own realm, its own transcendent, untrammeled spirit, your own beloved mighty I Am presence does not focus its attention so as to actually register or cognize in a way that would feed its life into them, giving them power. Your own mighty I Am presence does not cognize time or space, does not cognize place, and does not, in fact, hold cognizance of what would be considered outer conditions as they are out here in this world of perfection. Let me quote this one very, very powerful and pregnant statement by beloved Saint Germain. In transcending all earthly laws, we, the ascended masters, but claim our God-given authority to live and to act in perfect accord with the mighty I Am presence of the individual life stream and of the infinite presence. For this presence is eternal, changeless perfection, forever expanding itself through the individual. Now, when he is speaking of earthly laws, he's not speaking about a 55 mile per hour speed limit as a form of earthly law. He's speaking of such things as gravity, electromagnetism, the laws of nature per se. These are transcended by the glorious mighty I Am presence in its all-encompassing nature, a nature that is immutable, that really will never cease to be that which it is. It will never stop being that and start becoming something different altogether. It is in that sense that it is changeless. Also, as we touched upon for a few minutes yesterday, changeless in the sense that it is already every possible combination of life that life could have to offer. This too is the nature of your own beloved mighty I Am presence. As you begin to meditate upon this attribute of your presence, it will allow in time for there to be an expansion of consciousness take place within you. And as that expansion takes place, it means that you will be able to begin to appreciate the point of view whereby your presence looks at life versus how you look at life. Our vantage point out here in time and space is quite limited. And in fact, one might say it is crippled. And it is a sorry Rube Goldberg type contrivance that seeks to begin from the outermost realm and erect some superstructure of human rationality and logic and build a tower of Babel, of mortal intellect that is going to assault heaven, take heaven by force. That is certainly doomed to failure in all cases. The reverse is not true. For as you rise into that awareness that is held by your presence, you will see things from an entirely different vantage point and process that information that is fed to your consciousness, and you will have that understanding that allows everything to fit together and to be a part of your future. Long ago, Saint Germain explained this consciousness that is held, the way in which your glorious presence actually knows and looks at life, the same life that you look at here below. Here is how he put it. God, your presence, knows everything according to that presence' own nature. And therefore your presence knows divided things in an undivided way. We have a multiplicity of life out here. We have quite an infinite variety of things. We have the extension of space and all of the matter that fills the whole sidereal three-dimensional universe. All of those are the divided things, but all of these are known by the presence in an undivided way. The presence also knows things that come to be eternally. And here we're getting to the subject of this week. Things that come to be. That means that they are things that appear in time at a certain point in the stream of time. They come into expression. They are in expression for a while, and then they vanish away. Some things really quickly, other things take longer. But everything in this three-dimensional world has come into being, and in time it will vanish away. Those things we see in that way, but the mighty I Am Presence doesn't see them that way. Those same things that come to be, the Presence knows eternally. Remember, one of our axioms a few minutes ago was that nothing ever stops being what it is, and therefore nothing that ever comes into being can come into being unless it eternally is, unless it truly is. Now, the only exception to that rule is the temporary aberration known as the human imagination, the human mind that does create an aberration of things that temporarily come into being that have no permanency in the mind of God. So the Presence knows things that come to be eternally. We're going to come back to that one. That's a very big part of this because it involves that eternal knowing beyond the stream of time. And that which is closely associated with that, which is foreknowledge, providence, divine providence, or as it is in the Greek, pronoia, foreknowing. Come back to that shortly. God knows partial things universally, and in short, knows in an entirely different manner than is the nature of each of the things that are actually examined in question. And along with this knowledge, God therefore and thereby has control over the production of all such things. And by the very fact of knowing these things, with a simple and unified knowledge, he bestows upon each their eternal existence as well as their coming into being, coming into existence, or going out of existence. The moments of eternity that are the moments of your individual life's journey, the divine pilgrimage of your Godhead charioteer, are some of those very types of moments. There is one particular moment that we're going to touch upon now because of the implications that it has for each of you and the implications that it has for your heart flame. Beloved Helios said it this way a long time ago. He said, give all of you 1,000,000 years in which to expand your light, and at the end of that time, you won't even necessarily care to shake your hands the way you are today. What you are destined to become, that which you are in the process of becoming. One of the things that is destined to take place for all of the life streams who are the Godhead charioteers in embodiment on this planet. Of course, you know about the milestone of the victory of the ascension, and some of those other milestones, such as the resurrection, which is one of the moments in eternity that we will be touching upon much, much more during the latter part of this class. However, beloved, Saint Germain has explained something else that is a profound and magnificent truth of being. And that is one of the initiations that is beyond the ascension. For he explains that after the ascension of the twin flames, both of whom have come forth from the same great God flame, after that ascension has taken place and certain inner initiations have also occurred, then, and this is a very powerful statement, then, mind you, we're speaking now of ascended masters, then the threefold flame completely unfolds and expands to such a magnitude that it takes on the stature of the original God flame, such that that which came forth originally out of the great central sun, stepping forth as one God flame, returns to the great central sun as three complete, essentially co-equal God flames, returning in that fashion back to the heart of the great central sun. This, then, is the destiny not only of your life stream, so you think yourself to be, but it means that already within your threefold flame of your heart chakra, on the altar of your physical heart, already there is the spiritual DNA, if you will, of that future expansion to the magnitude of the great God flame. If you can only understand that this could never be possible in the future unless it is already true, unless it is already part of the nature of your life stream. For nothing ever becomes something that it is not already. Let's repeat that again, because it is something challenging to, in the first case, even wrap your mind around, but more than that, to actually accept as true for you. If this little heart flame that is currently like a coal that is glowing, it has fire within it, but it's kind of banked. If this little heart flame in the physical body is someday going to expand to such an extent that it will equal in magnitude and in quality the nature of the great God flame, it means that already that must be true within that heart flame and within the source that is projecting that heart flame. Of course, the question then becomes, several questions arise. One is, if it is already all of that, why do we have to go through the bother of being in incarnation? Why not just snap our fingers as the great God flame and make it so? Why the travail? Why all of the tremendous striving that must go on? The other question that presents itself is how? How could this be true? It seems as if, given the frail mortality and weakness of the outer self, it is hardly implying the magnitude of expression that is being spoken of. And of course, this has been the bane of the great Brotherhood of Light's efforts with mankind down through the ages, that whenever they have come forth mankind have prostrated themselves, felt that they were in the presence of some other celestial race of beings that were totally above and beyond anything that any human being had ever been. And they created that gulf. So the question is there a how can there ever be such a quantum leap from becoming what one appears to be today to what one has an idea that they can become or are supposed to become sometime in the future? And yet this is the truth of the law. These are only questions to the concrete mortal consciousness as it tries to grapple with truths that are really native to a higher nature of themselves. But there is one particular aspect of this that does kind of bridge the gap and enable you to knit together both of these, what appear to be conflicting stages, the present state where people are, and this state not only of the ascended master, but of the consciousness of the great God flame. And that comes from understanding the meaning of divine expansion, rather than a concept that involves either a sense of evolution or a sense of growth or a sense of magical transformation. The Master has pointed out that as a life stream grows up from infancy in this world, they naturally encounter the passage of time. They naturally see things start out small and grow bigger, and in many cases expire and vanish away with the passage of time. So there seems to be this intangible thing called the passage of time, during which things grow. Not only do they grow, but sometimes there is the sense, and certainly the world has bought into this hook, line, and sinker, there is the concept of evolving from one thing into something else. That predicament was captured poignantly in the story told by Hans Christian Andersen of the poor little ugly duckling that was born in a nest with a group of other ducklings, but it was always out of step with its siblings, bigger and more bumbling, not as the same color or the same ilk as all the rest of them. And the story goes on that this poor ugly duckling tried its mightiest to be like its peers, like its brothers and sisters, but to no avail. No matter how hard it tried, it could not transform itself into what they were. And so many of you might have that feeling. How, oh how am I here going to transform myself from this frail, mistake-prone, weak outer self with all of it, what I think I know about myself? How am I going to make the quantum leap from being this human being and somehow or another turn into an ascended master? And the truth of the matter is, if you were being expected to evolve, then you would have a dilemma on your hands because you could never do it. Because you could never become something that you are not. There's the inherent mortal fallacy in that argument. On the other hand, if the truth of who and what you are already is the mighty I Am presence, then you don't have to become something you're not. What is required in that case is not really that kind of change. But what is required is that that which the mighty I Am presence is, expand where you are. Expand from within out, through you and as you. Expand that which is already, to use modern parlance, programmed into your DNA, your spiritual DNA, as a firstborn son and daughter of God. And that is the organic way in which the presence does all things, including creating and including expanding itself. It expands from within out that which it already is, that which it has never ceased to be at each of the way stations of its own selfhood, which it has established as vehicles of expression for itself, whether it be the vehicle of the Christ presence, the causal body, the electronic body, the God flame of the twin flames. All of these are greater and greater expressions of that individuality of the mighty I Am presence that each and every one of you are. And as you come to realize the method whereby this is to occur, you can kind of breathe a deep, deep breath and realize that it's okay, because you are not expected to perform some magic or some miraculous transformation that is above and beyond reality. But all you really have to do is to facilitate the expansion of your mighty I Am presence through you out into the chalice of your four lower bodies from within out, expanding that light more and more. This expansion isn't just something that takes place figuratively. That word is not used merely as a flowery term, but it is intended to be interpreted literally. In this sense, the crystal cord of your individuality with that spark of the threefold flame has magnetized a whole series of vehicles. You call them your four lower bodies. It has taken on itself material of these outer realms of creation, and it has attracted them to it. Not just to hold on to them temporarily, but the plan is for that heart flame to appropriate them, and the term is to ensoul those material bodies. How to describe ensouling? It only really will be understood when you are in those higher vehicles and you are looking from within out, and you perceive that there is an inside to each of these vehicles, to each of the matter of these planes. And that is where your crystal cord and your heart flame enter from within. And the plan is for the light and life of the mighty presence to ensoul those bodies and to be like the bellows of a blacksmith's forge, to breathe the fire breath, the air breath, the water breath from within those vehicles and expand them from within out, kindling them to a point of self-luminosity. And in the process, most important, what is going on is that your mighty I Am presence is expanding its own God consciousness through the matter of each of these bodies from within out. It is ensouling it and taking dominion over it, making those bodies, in the case of the one who is to ascend, a permanent vehicle of expression for all eternity, to expand its own consciousness from within out, which gets us to the mystery of individualization, even before the mystery of incarnation. For the whole drama of life is a process whereby the presence, the I am that I am, the great I am, has elected to focus itself to a permanent ray of individuality, and then forevermore to expand from that, through that individualization of itself, and to pour forth more of that which the one is through those individualizations. Now, mind you, there's no getting around the handicap of having to speak of that in terms of a sequence. And do not allow any sense that that means that there was a time before the individualization. No, there wasn't a time before the individualization. There's only eternity where the individualization is going on. You'll understand it after your ascension. All you'll say is, why, of course. That's what he meant. That's very obvious. Now, why couldn't I understand that then? You'll understand it. It'll just be as plain as the stars in your crown. Nevertheless, that is what is taking place, is that expansion from within out. And when you in your mighty I Am presence made the election to take the final plunge into incarnation, you decided that you wanted to expand your God consciousness through the outer realms of creation, not just the physical universe with its many billions of light years across, but the whole of the cosmic feeling and the cosmic mind, those planes as well. Your presence wanted to expand its consciousness from within out and give birth to more and more of that in life. So while it is always there within, because when you get back to it, what is a mighty I Am presence? It is an individualization of the one presence. And it has an indelible, inextricable oneness with that primeval, changeless, timeless presence. It is the very embodiment and incarnation and individualization of that very presence, and it never relinquishes that hold upon the one. It is the individualization of the one. And so right there, from that first moment of eternity that we call individualization, from that moment, the whole circle of the stream that we call past, present, and future that is projected forth out of eternity was foreknown, preordained by this infinite mind of God. And that eventual stage of the expansion of the God flame, of the heart flame into the God flame, as that initiation of the twin flames ascended, that was seen in the mind of God. Part of this is known as the quality of divine providence. Providence is not fate. Providence is not karma. Providence is related to, but is not the same thing as destiny, even a divine destiny. Providence is not really the divine plan per se. Providence is the love of the one, the love of the good, of the one presence that must give itself to all of life, must expand its heart from within out, and must be forever unfolding from within itself more and more of that which is within itself. So it is always there, yes, within. However, there is always the joy of the expansion that must take place for it to be externalized, for it to come forth. And that joy, that bliss of love, that bliss of having the largesse of the good of God, and the ability to confer one's love, one's attainment in the discovery of the nature of the one, one's attainment in the many attributes of the one, the ability to bring those forth and to lavish them profligately without premeditation or measure, but to ray those forth upon every part of life. That is the supreme privilege which the presence elected to express as itself, which you are. It is the best gift that the presence could give, the allness of itself. You are the giver, you are the giving, you are the gift of that expansion of the presence from within itself out to every part of life. So that is how it is not vanity to come forth from the changelessness of the allness of this presence, nor is it a form of slavish predestination that this should be the divine providence that has been preordained by your own mighty presence to give forth to life. For your joy, you may wish to rejoice, to know that no matter how much of the one presence that you expand and externalize, discovering and lavishing upon other parts of life, you will never exhaust the possibilities of that which is in the one. Were you Alpha and Omega, you would still not have reached an ending to where there was nothing more to do or to become or to expand of that one presence. In that expansion is the true badge of merit. For although it is performed by the mighty I Am presence, both before and after the ascension, there is striving. There is that alchemical TRY. That is not human struggle. It is not a sense of the human as the doer, but nor is it a process of sprinkling Tinkerbell's fairy dust and performing some magique whereby everything is transformed in the twinkling of an eye into something that it was not before. Every ascended master, cosmic being, has the sense of worth, of knowing that that which they have expanded, that which the presence has expanded through them, is a work of worth, of ultimate worth and merit. Garments of attainment that are there to be worn in the proper sense of dignity and expanded and used in service to all of life. This really and truly is that which is taking place in the mystery of the Incarnation, the mystery of the Godhead charioteer's painting, the mystery that we speak of as God individualized, one God, one presence, many sons, many daughters. With that in mind, let us meditate for a few moments on the concept of divine providence. Providence is pronoia, foreknowing. It means that as that individualization of the presence comes forth, that expression of the one mind, of the one God, sees with a clarity of vision both that which it is and that which it is going to expand from within itself. And in that sense, if you wish to call that becoming, call it becoming, that which it will become. And each of these stages of expansion are stages of the initiatory life of the Godhead charioteer, the individualization of the Godhead. All of this takes place originally in eternity. Let's see if we can try to give you some approximation of what that means. Maybe you are familiar with the concept in modern photography of strobe light photography. That's the case when you take a camera and you don't allow, in times past, you would have said, the film to advance. But now, I don't know how they call it for solid state memory chips, but essentially the negative stays the same. And as something or someone moves, light flashes. Just for an instant, it flashes on and the reflection creates an image on the negative. Split second later, another flash. Split second later, another flash. So if someone were to walk across a room while this process is taking place, and then that image were to be printed out, you would see the same person in various steps of movement across the room. Each of those partial images would be a moment. And really and truly, that is what is taking place in the narrative of the individualization of the Godhead that decides to take incarnation, which we have named with the proper name of the Godhead charioteer. So as you meditate upon this painting of the Godhead charioteer, consider that it is one of those strobe-like time-lapse type photographs where really it is you, your God flame, that is being depicted at every stage of the process. And each of those stages is you, and you are, and each of them is a moment of your process. Coming forth out of the great central sun, the coming forth of the God flame, then the coming forth of the two mighty I am presences, the building up of the causal body, the building up of the Christ presence as the charioteer proper, then eventually the sending forth of the threefold flame into incarnation to do what? To have the God consciousness of the I am presence lay hold of earth, fire, water, and air, ensoul them with, and to expand consciousness of the presence from within out, utilizing the form, utilizing the matter. You have no concept yet of just how much light of consciousness can flow through the atoms and cells of your flesh body. Sometimes that will happen. The most dramatic example of it in the life of Jesus was the moment of the transfiguration, when that light got so bright that it actually broke the barriers of physical luminosity, was visible to those around him. Same thing happened to Moses when he was up getting the 10 Commandments. So consciousness can flow through and still utilize matter in the physical flesh. So that is taking place through those stages. Then you have the stages of coming up out of incarnation in the resurrection. The first figure you see there is the Christ presence, still distinct from the four lower bodies as that resurrected state. And then after that, the Christ, the electronic body, the four lower bodies are all fused into one ascended master body of light, which continues on. At some point here, you would also have that next initiation, where the two ascended twin flames then expand the heart flame still further. And you'll notice Saint Germain uses the word, the threefold flame at that initiation is completely unfolded. And each one then becomes as the original God flame of identity that first came forth from the great central sun. If you think of this as a living, moving newsreel that keeps playing over and over and over again. Actually, in Philos the Tibetan, there actually was a similar depiction that was shown of a certain initiation of the walking of the Stations of the Cross by Philos in his final earthly incarnation. In this case, this is a diorama that is taking place all simultaneously in the eternal mind of God. All of these are taking place there. And what is important for the outer self to realize is that if it is good enough for the mighty I Am presence to know this about itself, it is good enough for the outer self to accept, to embrace, to bow before the grace of the presence and to cooperate with the presence in this great work of the ages, which the presence is engaged in for itself. And the outer self should realize that if God, the individualization of the presence, has carved these images in eternal thought, even as they are preordained as divine providence, that act of thinking them is an accomplished fact. And if you wish to use the crutches of past, present, and future, God thought this, or your presence thought this about its own nature already, what you might think of as in the past. So it is, in that sense, a victory that has already been decreed, a victory that your presence has won. For that which the presence has decreed is going to come to pass. You don't think so? Your presence will have the last laugh and the last word. Because the truth of the matter is that in the ongoingness of eternity, this down here will eventually never have happened at all. This will be erased from the memory of life and never have happened. And the only thing that there will be is the eternal etched record that is decreed by the presence for its own victory. Each of these stages in that process, each of those is one of these moments in eternity. That is, before the mind of your presence now, your presence mind is holding them all in consciousness simultaneously. They're all there as present in what has almost become a cliche but should never have been co-opted, that eternal now of the presence. That is where eternity is. All of them are there. They are all the history, the heritage, the birthright, if you will, of that presence. And the way in which the sons and daughters of God embodied, the disciples of the ascended masters, and the way in which the ascended masters that the brotherhood know that all mankind are eventually going to be free, is to take a step to the side of their outer self, to step out of this 21st century temporary moment in the span of time, and to step into this eternal truth of identity that is the mighty I Am presence, and cooperating with that presence, understand that we can shorten the span of time that it takes for our present to catch up to the mighty I Am presence future. Those two timelines are going to intersect at some point. And that can happen even now, as we actually enter back into that consciousness of the presence and understand that it is all the rock of God consciousness, the foundation upon which everything else is built. It will go such a long way for each of you as you're sitting in your chair to think of yourself as seated upon the atomic accelerator as if it were a throne, and to realize the the high estate of your own heart flame, to liberate that heart flame, set it free, and let it begin to expand in each of the four lower bodies in turn, sourced by the mighty I Am presence, all of the consciousness of that presence, and expanding it forth out into this outer realm of creation, thereby hastening the time when all of those moments of eternity that seem to be somewhere down the stream of time in the so-called future, where they can catch up to the present and intersect with the present moment and come forth and be produced. Isn't it the most wonderful thing to realize that you're not being called upon to be something that you are not truthfully? Isn't that the greatest comfort that the law can afford you? To have the certitude of knowing that in that heart of your presence that is the threefold flame, that presence is already as complete as it will ever be. And you are able to awaken to that and allow that cooperation to take place. And also for you to have the sense, and this I think is worth having. We can debate the questions of fate and of predestination, which have been things of curiosity for theologians and philosophers for a long time. But it is also very useful to realize the true meaning of divine providence. You might recall that beloved Godfrey, as George Washington and all the early American patriots, felt the wind of divine providence at work in their lives and in the destiny of the service that they were engaged in. And that is how you should feel about your own life stream. That divine providence is an irresistible force whereby all of life and all of creation and all of the hierarchy is in a conscious cooperation bordering on a glorious conspiracy to guide, guard, direct, protect, motivate, inspire, and in every way bring about the victory of your victory and the birth of that heart flame, the expansion of it in the transfiguration, in the resurrection, in the ascension. As you realize how inevitable that is, how it is decreed at the highest levels of the Godhead, and has been decreed from the beginning by your own beloved mighty I Am presence, and that the only opposition to it has been yourself, for whatever reason, in insisting upon a separate identity from your God presence. Now you know how foolish and how short-sighted that was. Now you can dispense with all of that. Now you no longer need the poverty-stricken human ego to be your familiar, but rather you can have your own mighty I Am presence as that sense of selfhood, that true selfhood that you are, bringing that forth into all of creation. So I hope that this leaves you with some sense of how your presence is experiencing itself at its level, and the perspective through your Christ self that that presence has about what the presence is doing here and how to accomplish it. That having been laid down as foundational, then we can look more particularly at many of these glorious stages of the moments in that unbroken circle of eternity that the presence knows to be true about its own nature. And that is going to become our focus of our attention, we as an Ascended Master activity. We're going to be more interested in what is happening with that presence. What does this time of the year commemorate in terms of our presence? And the victories of our presence will be the victories that we celebrate. Thank you.